Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend Jake McGuire. Unfortunately, Sunday, that was a bit of a doozy. The game was really close, especially early on. The 27 to 10 final score, I don't think is indicative of how the game kind of played out through four quarters. However, 17-point loss, putrid performance on the offensive side. Like where do we go from this? Because at this point, the NFC South, along with the Carolina Panthers, has kind of become the laughing stock or the butt of a lot of jokes in the NFL, and causing this stir that like maybe a division winner shouldn't host a playoff game, which I disagree with completely. But it's just those kind of narratives frustrate you after the loss we just witnessed Sunday.
I think those first, I think the playoff thing is absurd. Divisions matter. Win your division. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Just beat the teams in your division. But I think when you look at this game and look at the outcome and the offense, how bad it was, you're certainly disappointed, right? But if you take I guess the 1,000 foot view, or however you want to call it, the bird's eye view of this, the Seahawks were the number one team in the NFC, maybe the best team in the league, you could argue. I think their defense was top two or three. And I think that because Carolina had beaten the Packers in Lambeau when they were the ones we had beaten the Rams here in Charlotte a couple weeks ago. I think that we kind of boosted our own expectations just a bit. You got to remember we were also a touchdown underdog, I think, or more. I think it's 7.5. And so eventually one of these games is going to catch up to us where we're going against a one seed and it just doesn't work out. And it happened to be this one. I think it's more disappointing, however, because this is one game, I would say, for the majority of it, where I didn't have complaints about the defensive scheme. I thought Coach Evero, the defensive coordinator, was calling out of his mind, like calling really good stuff, putting the Seahawks in adverse conditions, generating some turnovers, even though both of them were probably questionable as far as ref decisions, like the one being a fumble and then the interception, ruling it in or out. Ultimately, it was ruled in, but it just sucks that it fell apart when it was 3-3 at halftime. We got it to 17-10, and then it seemed like this was the exact play that did it. A 3rd and 21, we had backed him up with a couple of tackles for loss, and J.C. Horn, for I have no idea why he decides to try to tackle Jackson Smith and Jigba, the star receiver for Seattle. He tries to tackle him high instead of just pushing him out of bounds, and they convert a 3rd and 21 with the penalty, and they get on a roll, and they don't stop after that. And it feels like that's when the game fell apart, but you also can't excuse how bad the offense was as a whole.
Yeah, they go on a 14 play drive there, the kick a field goal to go up 10 points, and really at that point the game goes out of reach. Prior to that, obviously the Panthers drove down, scored a touchdown of their own. That was a 10 plus play drive. I'm trying to remember if that was the 11 play drive. I think it was a 13 play drive in the first half is when we went down and kicked a field goal. Again, it was towards the end of both halves. There was no consistency, and I think that was the frustrating part. I think watching Xavier Legette again, it's just at this point it's frustrating. I think it's fair to say he's Jonathan Mingo 2.0. There's no way around it. The
Well,
mental errors are constantly putting this team behind the sticks, and it's frustrating.
his lows are way lower than what Mingo did. I'll admit, because when they were drafted, I thought their profiles were similar, but I thought Legette's ceiling was higher, and I think it is. You know, he scored touchdowns. He's able to take passes downfield, but the lows, the mental errors, the unforced things are much worse than anything Mingo did. Like the Mingo mental errors were he can't control his own body. Like he would run backwards or fling his body out of bounds instead of being able to stop. But the Leggett ones are he doesn't know where the sideline is. He doesn't know where he's lined up. Do you know how hard it is to for a wide receiver to be lined up off sides on offense? You almost have to try to do it because I don't know if you pay attention. Every time a receiver lines up, they point to the sideline because there's an umpire there called the line judge. His entire job is to look down the neutral zone and see if anybody's offside. So receivers will look and point at him if they're up on the line and say, "Hey, am I good?" And they'll give him a thumbs up. And it looked like Liget looked over there and just didn't see that the line judge told him to back up half a foot or something like that. You could tell on the broadcast he was clearly offsides by the superimposed line there. But it's just these kind of unforced errors. you can't be on the field if you're doing like that's a net negative you being on the field. And that's just something you don't want to see. On the other side of the ball, I don't think it was as bad, but obviously the JC Horn face mask, he dropped a very easy interception. And I don't remember if it was the first drive, but it was in the first quarter where he dropped a very easy one. I think it was the first drive.
The
And
the
he's been
ball was tipped, so like you have the spiral element, but it's again
sure.
something you should be
It hit,
practicing
but
of
it
like
it
the punt
legitimately
returns and
hit
whatnot.
him in the
It
stomach.
did. It
Like, it
was yeah,
tipped
chest.
directly to him. So if he
Yeah.
puts his arms up, he probably brings in the interception, and it's those kind of errors combined with the fact that we couldn't move the ball against this defense, that, like, if you don't make those errors, maybe you beat a number 1 seed. Like, that's how we beat the Rams. We didn't make any errors in that game. We just went band for band with them, and we turned over Matthew Stafford. There's the same thing with the Packers. We didn't make many errors. We turned them over. I think it was 3 or 4 times. But when you make the errors and the offense can't get going, we're obviously not going to be able to beat a top 2 to 3 team in the league. You know.
I mean, I think Cam Newton said it a few within the past couple weeks in regards to Xavier Legette, like the kadoosh, kadoosh. And it's all this like showing off like these workout videos in the off season, showing how big and physical you are, showing up in a Glorilla music video. And it just came down to just like you should have kept the main thing. And you haven't been able to do it. And so as a result, we're seeing these mental errors just spill into his game to the point where Dave Canales kind of pulled him off the field. He did not see as many snaps, and I think moving forward, we're probably going to see more Jimmy Horn, maybe David Moore. He finally had a full practice. Those guys are going to be more reinserted, and Leggett will find himself on the bench. I, in regards to the defense, I think where you talked about, you had the Horn dropped interception, you had the Derek Brown dropped interception. That one was
I would give him more grace because he's
that
like
was harder.
fumbling
Yeah,
through the air. Yeah.
yeah. But it's more just like if you're able to capitalize on those plays, Horn doesn't have the face mask. You're putting your offense in a position to at least go win the game when they didn't deserve to pretty much all day. And I think that's more just the frustration. It was like with the 49ers, the defense was capitalizing on those bounces so you could put it all on the offense. It was just very frustrating to see a really good defensive performance, but not see some of our star defenders finish plays. And it cost us the day because obviously we couldn't get it done on offense. It doesn't help. Bryce Young goes 14 to 24 for 54 yards. I think this is one of the lowest games in terms of like yards per attempt in NFL history. So not a great look, but again, this is a pretty stout Seattle defense. And when you're not able to run the football, when you're not able to find a rhythm in the quick passing game, I I think it can get drawn out like this. But again, it being a 3-3 game at half, I don't see why the playbook wasn't explored more early and often.
Yeah, the passing numbers look really, really bad for Young. 14 24, 54 yards, and it was like 60 something after the catch, too, right? So there are quite a few behind the line of scrimmage. If you go back and look, it's not like he's just panicking and dumping them down. He was going through progressions, but we were covered like very consistently. And that starts with T Mac having the flu or whatever it was. He had an illness pop up like an hour before the game, which is never ideal, right? Leggett just not being in position and stuff like that. And I think they did a really good job blanketing Jalen Coker. But when your top 2 or 3 guys are like that, you lose Jatavian Sanders, who's kind of the outlet, the tight end outlet if we have one. You lose him on the first or second drive. He has a broken ankle, so he obviously won't be playing the rest of the year. They just got out of rhythm, right? And so it would be all right. Progression 1-2 check down, and so Rico Dowdle would get like a 2 yard catch. Chuba Hubbard would get a 2 yard catch, and that's basically what the passing offense was the whole game. Even when we were moving the ball, even when we got into the red zone, we didn't have a passing touchdown, right? Bryce Young had to scramble and run one in. So when they took the pass away and you weren't able to run the ball effectively, it was just a recipe for disaster. And then the times that you were gifted the ball, we converted it into a field goal, and then we got the interception in the end zone at the beginning of the second half. Chuba Hubbard instantly fumbles it on the first play, actually, giving Seattle the ball back where they threw the interception. So even when the defense stepped up, the offense couldn't capitalize on what they were doing. So incredibly disappointing game from that standpoint. But I think there are some things that you have to take away from this, because I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But if the Panthers do make the playoffs, Seattle is one of the two or three teams that they are going to host. So you have to be able to look at what went wrong in this game and be able to apply it moving forward.
Well, we talked about this last week. The best way to beat this team would be to limit possessions because up
Right.
until like the end of the second half, all of their drives were a few plays. It was either they were moving the ball and scoring, or they were hitting kind of like a roadblock and there was a punt or like a turnover. And so in those situations, we talked about it from like an offensive standpoint. You need to find a way to sustain drives, whether that's running the ball, whether that's passing the ball, finding a blend that works for you. You have to be able to, I think, have a game plan for that. And I think Jatavian Sanders going down early in the game impacted what they wanted to do out of 12 and 13 personnel sets. So maybe you go back to the drawing board and you're able to work around that the next go round if there is a second time. But that, I think that's what you have to lean on because the defense did its job for the most part. Obviously, Zach Charbonnet kind of got going in the second half, had 20 touchdowns for 122 yards, two scores. I think set up AJ Barner nicely on a lot of their play action looks that helped Sam Darnold out. Like because I think up until that point, when Darnold was forced to just drop back and pass, it did not look good. And so I think in a repeat, we can duplicate that. It's on offense. How are you going to be able to combat what you just got dealt?
And I think the disturbing part about that, or the difficult part about that, is the players do their locker room stuff after the game every week, and T Mac Tedero McMillan said they played a lot more man than we were expecting. Going into this game, Seattle is the number one zone defense team because they have a great front and the rest of their linebackers and DBs can fly. But they switched that up, and it seemed like the Panthers staff wasn't ready for that. Like they didn't have their man beaters dialed into the game plan, so to speak. And it obviously sucks when your top guy is sick, but like I feel like being more prepared has to be something to to address here, I guess, like or just being more prepared for anything. Because Mike McDonald, excuse me, he's a smart coach who's going to be able to switch things up and disrupt it. You got to be able to adapt in game. And like you said, we didn't see any changes till halftime, really, or till after
And
halftime.
Bryce Young last year on kind of that resurgence, he found a lot of success against man coverage. I mean,
Mhm.
especially looking at that Kansas City game, that was what he did. I think honestly better. Like a lot of the issues coming into this year were like, how are you going to deal with zone coverage? And I get exactly like you said, like your game plan isn't expecting as much of this, but like that's where you have to be able to change things on a fly. And you should be able to dial into plays, especially at the line of scrimmage with using motion to find okay the indicator that this is man coverage and then go to your man beater. Like it should be that simple. But again, I guess these are things that they're going to be talking about this week. And again, if you play them about like what
It'd
or
be in
or
2
13
weeks.
days. Well, that's what I was like. I
Yeah,
was trying to figure
13
out
days.
the day count, but like kind of that range of like when you'll play them again, because this will be very quick if that is the matchup.
Well, and I think the difficult part about the man coverage stuff this year is you had your go-to guy last year in Thielen, right? Who's a veteran, 10 plus years. He knows how to leverage DBs and stuff like that. When you trade him away and kind of move to all right, our top four receivers are rookie, second year guy, that becomes difficult, right? Especially when you lose your number one passing tight end at least. And so hopefully going forward, or at least for this week, because this is a do or die week. Essentially, we'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes, but you got to be on your P's and Q's there. You got to be able to have hot routes and stuff like that. There were no hot routes in that first half, and the O line they needed it because the O line was getting harassed, especially in the second half, by Seattle's defensive front. You talked about Darnold. Uh, for even though we lost, it was funny to see him kind of see ghosts in the first half. We talked about it. I read it from a tweet. I didn't see who had tweeted it until after the game. You brought it up, but Joe Person, the Panthers beat writer for the Athletic, said this is probably the loudest game Sam Darnold has ever seen in the stadium, and he was definitely right. We didn't have a lot of loud games when he was our quarterback, just because we weren't very good for the majority of his tenure here. But it was nice to see Darnold making a bunch of mistakes, but again, weren't able to capitalize on it. We got to take what happened and then move on to this week because we're playing on Saturday, not Sunday. The NFL's flexed us to the Saturday 4:30 game, which was kind of a mistake on their part, given how the LA Rams and Atlanta Falcons game went last night. But we're the first game of the week this week.
Get the kickoff, the final week of the regular season, and the implications are interesting. Obviously, if you win, you're in, and I think if you do that, you're 9-8. As much as there's going to be flack about like us hosting a playoff game from loser fans across the NFL, you are in a position where I think people can take you seriously. If you lose on Saturday, and it's interesting because Tage Seth has talked about this on Twitter, the Bucks can't hand out like division like attire, like the hats, the shirts, like we're NFC South champions until Sunday. Because if the Falcons win on Sunday, we're the winner in the NFC South because of like how tiebreakers work, and we're all 8-9, and it becomes a whole hoopla. But it's just interesting going into Saturday that like the Buccaneers are now 2-7 in their last 9 games. They are not able to get anything going. I think Baker is hampered by injuries, and Todd Bowles' defense is falling apart. Like these are guys that are not playing for their coach. And when you want to talk about like taking advantage of a team, like if Evero keeps dialing it up like he has been the last 3 weeks, like we saw it against Baker the first time, we just saw it against Sam Darnold. If he does it again against Baker, it's just a matter of like, can the offense capitalize and just do enough to win you the game and not like have these self-inflicted wounds that end up like causing you to lose this? Because I don't want this to be 2022 all over again. Like if JC Horn goes out and then for some reason Mike Evans like turns it up a notch and he's like the Mike Evans from like 5 years ago and just torches Mike Jackson and puts him on his highlight reel before retiring, like that's going to be sickening. And that is not what I want in my head, is a redo of 2022.
For sure. You started by talking about Todd Bowles and how there's a sense of defeat among that team, and it's not just on defense; it's the entire team, right? Not the last Panthers game, but they played. It was the Falcons on a Thursday night game, right? Because that's when they were wearing the creamsicles, right? And they lose that game. You see Mike Evans like screaming, walk into the locker room. You see Todd Bowles saying a bunch of expletives in his presser, and it sounds like he was forcing them. Not a lot of people sound like you shouldn't be swearing in general, but not a lot of people know how to swear effectively, and that's how it sounded. In his presser yesterday, so this would be on Monday, Todd Bowles, the Bucks head coach, says, or this is from a beat reporter in Tampa Bay. Bucks coach Todd Bowles confirms they have such a lack of confidence in covering kickoffs that they've opted to try for touchbacks and let teams start at the 35-yard line. He said that in a presser verbatim. So when you are saying out loud that you have such a lack of confidence in one area of your team to the media, to the world, do you think he doesn't say that behind closed doors? Like, this is a team that has accepted defeat on their losing streak. You have to be able to capitalize on it. You can't give them an inch because they are the more talented team. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile and try to make it a tough game against us. But the way we've been playing on our cycle, win loss, and the way they've been playing over the last half of the season, this is a game you got to take advantage of. And you can look at a lot of the stuff from 2 weeks ago that worked, right? Like the pressure, making Baker have to move in the pocket, make him have to beat you as opposed to letting the receivers get open, do all that kind of stuff. And then on offense, I would like to see a larger commitment to the ground game based on this past week. But with Vita Vea, it's tough. So you're going to have to mix some stuff up. All the stuff that we said 2 weeks ago on the pod, like limiting possessions, getting your receivers involved against their shorter, smaller defensive backs, that applies. But I think the main thing that applies, and you said it throughout this entire episode, you can't have self-inflicted errors on offense or defense, right? Because JC Horn, for as good as he was in that Tampa game, forcing the field goal, all that stuff, the games in between that, the Saints game and this Seattle game, he's been real bad. So he has to lock back in. I
The
mean, he
Seattle
wasn't.
game was good. It wasn't great, but like he made plays. It just he didn't finish plays, and like that's the issue.
Well, it was that, and then once the face mask happened, JSN just ate him. Like the entire drive, he was just they were because JC was playing
Yeah.
on him, trying to get his get back, and JSN was just getting off of him, 10-yard catch, 15-yard catch. After that, it was over. Noah's self-inflicted wounds. I'd like to see us try to have the game plan. We've talked about how it seems like Canales only has the game plan to obliterate teams occasionally. I'd like to see that game plan. I don't want to see it come down to a field goal if it has to. I'd like to see us put our foot on the pedal and continue to press the ball downfield. But ultimately, we like this is the game to take the Panthers seriously, because even if we lose and still win the division at 8-9 and host a playoff game or whatever, that sting is going to be in people's mouths like, oh, it's a losing team and they won the division, blah blah blah, whatever. You have to prove that you belong, right? Should a an 8-9 division team be in there? Yes, because of the rules, but that's not a team you're going to take seriously. So if you can end the season 9-8, which to be fair is overachieving, but still host a playoff, even if you get blown out in the playoff game, I think a 9-8 season is much more significant than a an 8-9 season falling short of the playoffs or whatever. But it's not just up to us in this game, because the Atlanta Falcons won last night. So even if we lose on Saturday, there is a chance we still win the division, like you talked about. There are basically four outcomes because there are two games. And in three of those outcomes, the Panthers win the division. The only way in which we do not place first and do not host a playoff game is if Tampa Bay wins, of course, and then the New Orleans Saints beat the Falcons on Sunday. So, as much as it pains me to do so, might have to root for the Falcons a little bit again if the Panthers can't take care of business.
So what's very interesting, um, there have been a couple teams in recent memory that have had losing seasons that make the playoffs. I think the two most recent ended up losing the games. I think Tampa Bay and Tom Brady's last year was 8-9. I think they were one and done. Washington in the COVID year, they hosted the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, took them down to the wire. Obviously, lose that game. The Buccaneers go on to win the Super Bowl. But then the following two times I think we see it happen, it's the 7-8 in 1 year for the 2014 Carolina Panthers. We end up winning a playoff game. And then you look at the, I believe, 2010 Seattle Seahawks with the Marshawn Lynch beast mode run at 7-9. So being 8-9 and somehow slipping into the playoffs, I think there's a level of maybe not taking you seriously enough. And if the Seahawks were to come right back, maybe they think like, oh, this is just going to be a cakewalk like it was. And you're able to hit your opponent in your mouth, their mouth. So I would lean that maybe luck would favor us, but recent history would suggest not. And I definitely am of the notion that, hey, like, make the statement that you belong. I think getting to this point in year two of the regime, going 9-8, getting to the playoffs, you're starting to stake a claim in the NFC South, and you're building something special. I don't think that anybody in the building is saying that this is a finished product, and it's more just a continual building on of what you have built. Where, as you've acknowledged with Todd Bowles and some of his pressers, I think early on in the season, like as this skid started happening, I think it was like the Patriots game, even like he came out and was like, well, if the players executed, like we're calling the right plays, it's just up to the players. And it's just like, yo, like you can't be just saying that, like you said, like out to the public, because if he's saying that just for all of us to hear, then what is being said behind closed doors? And I think that's just where he has lost that building. And that is a little bit different from what we're seeing with the Carolina Panthers and the constant up and down and just disappointment that comes with that, rather than losing a locker room.
I think that for the Panthers cycle, there would be a lot less disappointment about games like Seattle if you traded the Packers and Rams win. If you took those and traded it for two Saints wins, I think the outlook amongst the fan base would be much higher. The record would be the same, but we would have lost to the one seed three times. But we'd be building towards something because we're not losing the games that we're favored in or losing the games we're supposed to. That's not what happened, obviously, but you still have a chance now to prove you belong, to prove yourself right. That your build is going in the right direction. I think even if you lose this game and the Saints when you go 8-9, I still think that's a bit ahead of schedule. As disappointing as it would be, I think 8 wins is it's certainly higher than what Vegas said our team would win. But to your point about 8-9 making the playoffs, once you make the playoffs, your record doesn't matter. You're just in, right? So you have a chance to beat anybody once you're there. And you gave some good examples. The the 7-8-1 Panthers, still the team that has held the opponent to the fewest yards in a playoff game in history. Is like 80 something, like 87 yards or something.
Was that
And
Drew stay in that game, or was
it
it the guy
was
behind?
the it was
Okay.
against the Arizona Cardinals, obviously, and it was way lower than that throughout the game. They had a late run or something that brought it to like 80 something yards because it was like at 60 yards for the majority of that game.
I feel like they had a big negative play at the end of the game that secured it though, but maybe I'm wrong. Like it was like a lateral,
I
but
could
ended
be
up being
wrong.
like a
Yeah,
huge loss. But no, I agree. It was kind of like at the end, it was kind of a lot of fluky stuff. But for the most part, it was like Brenton Burson set him up with like
yeah.
this short field for one of their touchdowns, and outside of that, they did nothing.
Right, and you win that game, and then you obviously lose the next week, right? But that momentum, if you will, sets you up for the 2015 run. I'm not saying we're gonna go 15 or 16-1 next year if we win a playoff game, but you're proving to everybody and yourself. I think it's more important that you prove it to yourselves that you belong with not even a playoff win, but a win like this. You have to remember there aren't a ton of people on the roster from the Matt Rule and Frank Reich era because we've had a good amount of roster turnover as we should. But those teams, I'm not calling the people losers. I'm saying those teams lost a ton of games. They were, as you look at it from a wins perspective, they were losers. Like that was the culture that was built. And I think if you can get to 9-8, get to the playoffs, however way you can, I think that does a big, it's a big step in the right direction for changing this culture, continuing to change the culture. Then once that happens, and then you get more talent in here because it's still a fairly lower talented group, I would say. Once you continue to turn it around, that's when you start to make some noise and make some deep playoff runs. But we can't really preview this Bucks game. I mean, because we played them a couple of weeks ago. We saw what the Bucks did this past week against my Quinn Ewers Miami Dolphins, so we know what to expect from them. I think we're into takes territory now, and my take, it's going to be in line with like a game prediction, if you will. I think the Panthers are making the playoffs one way or another, and whether it's losing to Tampa Bay and then Atlanta saving us, or whether it's winning the standalone game on Saturday afternoon outright, I think we're going to see the Panthers, the Cardiac Cats, literally the Cardiac Cats this year with the up and down stuff, go back to the postseason for the first time since 2017.
So I'm going to build off a take, double down on a take I had this past offseason. But I like the fact that the Panthers make the playoffs any which way. It's leading towards that, which is cool. It's nice seeing that the odds of winning the division are so high. But I think Carolina takes care of business the old fashioned way. I think this Buccaneers team is reeling. I don't think this is the same Baker we were seeing earlier in the season or even the past couple seasons with Liam Cohen and then Dave Canales. And because of that, I think it kind of implodes on itself. And you saw that down in Miami. You saw some of the interceptions he had. And I think the Panthers win on Saturday. And then I think, and this goes off the take I had in the offseason, obviously the Falcons aren't going to have a top 5 pick because Kirk Cousins came in and relieved Michael Penix, who probably would have delivered the Falcons a top 5 pick.
Or
But the
delivered
New
the
Orleans,
Rams a top 5 pick.
yes, you're absolutely right. They don't have their first round pick. That's the butt of the joke. But Tyler Shuck, I think, gets the job done against Kirk Cousins, and the New Orleans Saints beat the Atlanta Falcons, meaning that they finish second in the division. The Buccaneers will finish third, and the Falcons will finish fourth. So the take is the Panthers take care of business, and then the Saints end their season on a high note. That is how I see it playing out. I will say we do have a listener, and he texts me every week before the game his Panthers take. Obviously, I didn't get my perfect take right last week, saying that the Panthers would cover. We obviously got beat by 17 points, but he said, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, if you look at some of the odds, was projected around I think around 100 yards. He said he would have less than 79 yards. So he finished the day with 72 yards. So shout out to him. Just wanted to give him kudos for listening with us. Any final thoughts as we're wrapping up, Jacob?
Well, I thought you were going to go in a different direction with an offseason take about Todd Bowles and how this might be the end of Todd Bowles. And I think that that's a good. Obviously, I'm not wishing anyone to get fired, but I think that's a fair prediction if the Buccaneers lose. I compared it to and this was when they were hiring their new offensive coordinator. I compared it to how Mike Vrabel's Tennessee tenure was, and he obviously struck on the Packers guy Lafleur. That was his first coordinator. He struck on Arthur Smith, who was his second coordinator. Both of those guys go on to be head coaches. They have varying degrees of success, if you will. And then the third coordinator that he got, I can't recall the guy's name, but I know that it didn't work out because Vrabel ultimately was fired. And maybe for different reasons, because the ownership in Tennessee is very fickle. But if you look at what's happening in Tampa now, they lose Dave Canales to the Panthers. They lose Liam Cohen to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, if current standings hold, both of those teams make the playoffs, right? And then the third guy, Grizzard, hasn't been able to capture the same level of success in the second half of the season. And then there's injuries and people in and out of the lineup all year. But the offense, the defense regressing quite a bit, and then the special teams gaffes. I think that ultimately will spell the end of the Todd Bowles era. I mean, if you just hear the way he talks in pressers, it seems like he knows that it's house money and that he's on his way out. And I think that's a shame. It's been a long era there, but I don't mind it as a Panthers fan if he sticks around a couple more seasons. And I will say this as well. I think if they don't make the playoffs, I think Mike Evans is done, and I think Levante David is done as well. I think both of the lifelong Buccaneers stars of the franchise are going to hang it up if this is their final game. We won't see them again. At least as Buccaneers, I don't think we'll see them again. So that could be a mini take alongside of it as well.
A bonus take, if you will,
Yeah,
for our listeners.
an
So there you
imperfect
go.
one. Yeah. But I think that's, unless you have any other little takes you want to throw out there, we'll be tuned in on Saturday at 4:30 Eastern. Again, that's the only game playing at that time. The Panthers not great in prime time, but we haven't played a 4:30 game since the Cardinals game at the start of the year. So hopefully it goes better than it did that time. Until next Tuesday, hopefully we're back to talk about playoffs and playoff implications. But if not, we'll be talking about all the other playoff games and stuff like that. So you can find us on Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your content. And for a potential Panthers playoff berth, keep pounding.